It just seems like a very special thing that we do. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but
yeah, I agree completely. Music really stands out as a big mystery. Everybody loves it, as you say, from infancy through old age. Almost everyone around the world in all different cultures, we love music. It's a really big part of our lives. And yet, how it might contribute to survival and reproduction is completely mysterious. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have any obvious utility.
Music is a human universal. It is absolutely everywhere. You literally cannot find a single human society that doesn't love it, doesn't produce it. Its character and origins have long intrigued scholars from ancient times through to now. The more archaeologists excavate, the further back in time we find evidence of music. Our archaic Stone Age cousins might also have rocked out to a funky beat or two. But despite all this, there remains one huge unanswered question.
need 3 takes.
Why do we do it? I sat down with Professor Ed Hagen to discuss 4 hypotheses on the origins of our love of rhythm. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to my streaming video service Nebula when you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description.
I think where we need to start is that not everything has to have evolved to have some function. And that is the hypothesis that's commonly known as the auditory cheesecake hypothesis of Steve Pinker.
Humans, by and large, love cheesecake, love desserts. Not because our ancestors evolved and developed in a cheesecake-rich environment, but because we love a high-calorie diet with lots of fats and sugars. And cheesecake happens to tickle those same senses. Pinker wondered if the same was true for music. In particular, he argued these 6 senses were tickled by music. First, language, which is of course intimately connected to music in many, many ways that you're all aware of. Second, auditory scene analysis. So our ears receive an absolute cacophony of sounds that the brain has to interpret and analyze to make sense of the chaos around us. Perhaps music with its string of related harmonies really satisfies the part of our brain that likes to make sense of a complex sound world. Third, emotional calls. Perhaps music evokes a strong emotional response in us because it resembles in some way our instinctual emotional reactions. Laughter, cheering, screaming. 4. Habitat selection. Obviously, when selecting a home, we pay attention to visual clues of safety, like nice light, open views, etc. But also auditory signals of safety. You wouldn't like being near howling wind or the roar of a flash flood. Perhaps music signals the opposite, that this is a safe environment. Maybe the rising and falling of musical tones mimics in some way the rising and falling of natural sounds that we're compelled to listen for. 5. Motor control. Our bodies love rhythm, whether it's in running, jumping, playing. We love to move, we love the rhythm of movement. Perhaps music and dance are a concentrated dose of that. 6. Something else that makes music greater than the sum of its parts, some je ne sais quoi, some special extra ingredient.
Well, it does seem like, as I was saying with my kid, we seem to love it so much for it to be a byproduct of just other factors. But saying that, we do love cheesecake a lot.
Right.
So,
right, and that's the mystery.
Complicated, yeah.
It is a really strong hypothesis, and that's the one we have to beat. I think where Steve, the weakness in Steve Pinker's idea is that he really doesn't grapple with what we call comparative evidence, which is looking at similar behaviors in other species that aren't human music, but aren't that different either. So if we just look at vocal communication, we see that many species communicate with very rich, complex auditory signals. And as we all know, a lot of them kind of do sound like music. Bird song sounds a lot like music.
Do we consider what a bird does music? Is it different to what we do?
Yeah, so Steve would say yes. So he would want to define music in a way that excludes bird song. And of course, folks like me would want to define birdsong in a way, and music in a way that includes birdsong. Neither I nor anybody else who's kind of working on sort of adaptive functions for music would claim that birdsong is exactly the same as human music. But we'd say there's enough similarities that we can't dismiss the overlap.
Birds don't just produce song for sexual selection. They like to mark their territory and ward off predators, things like that. But sexual selection is a massive part of birdsong. Could the same be true for humans? Did we develop music to suggest some sort of sexual fitness on our part?
So this was Darwin's original idea for the evolution. In fact, Darwin proposed the first evolutionary hypothesis for the evolution of human music, and it was with an explicit analogy to birdsong, which he and many others, biologists even today, feel in many species is what we call sexually selected signal. And so all species face the problem of attracting mates. There's often a process of mate selection that your fitness, your ability to produce viable offspring depends on the quality of your mate. So there's going to be mate selection. You want to pick the best mate, and that can apply to females, it can apply to males, it can apply to both sexes, often does. But the question is, how does the opposite sex assess mate quality? And one of the hypotheses for birdsong isn't as exactly as you said, is that it's a sexually selected signal, that producing song takes very sophisticated cognitive abilities. It involves precise generation of notes, precise sequencing. Unfortunately, mutations are happening all the time that can interfere with that. Males, let's say, that are producing high quality songs may be more attractive to females. Now your question, and so what Darwin proposed is, could that be the same thing that's true in humans? And it has a lot of face validity. We all know that rock stars get the babes.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned start talking about sexual selection. My mind did immediately jump to Motley Crue.
Right.
They are like the archetypal definition of that. I'm sure Charles Darwin would have a lot to say about that.
Right.
But
I always think of Aerosmith.
What did we get ourselves into?
We know that, it seems like at least half the songs out there are love songs and have lots of sexual themes. So I think the sexual selection hypothesis, at least initially, seems like a really strong one. But what we see in other species where the case for a sexually selected song is really strong, it's males giving the songs to attract females. There's a real sex difference in song production. And in sexually selected signals in general, you'll often see the males are the ones giving off these signals to attract females. So if that were the explanation in humans, we should really see a lot of sex differences in music abilities, music production, and we really don't. So women are just as accomplished musicians as males. They enjoy music just as much as males do. They're just as good at it. So there's none of the sex differences that we would expect.
There are other things that suggest our love of music isn't purely sexual in nature. People of all sorts of different sexualities can enjoy music by different sexes. There's no correlation there. You would expect children to make more music as they went through puberty, but that's not true. Children of any age love making music. Parents love singing to their children. So even though sexual selection might have played some part in the development of music, it's definitely not the only thing going on. As I'm making this video, I'm trying to think about the times where I've absolutely loved music, participating in it, making it, all that stuff. And it's got to be when I'm with my mates at something, especially if we've been drinking. Probably the time I've most enjoyed music is drunk at a pub, singing, I don't know, Fairy Tale of New York or something. That's probably sincerely the time I've most enjoyed music. And this idea that music sort of bonds us together is actually a really popular hypothesis for its origins.
So the social bonding hypothesis is the most popular hypothesis right now for the evolution of human music.
There isn't one single social bonding hypothesis of music. It's an idea that's been thought about a lot. But here is a summary of a popular idea recently expressed in this paper. The idea works like this. living together in a group has a cost. You're more likely to get diseases, there's a lot more competition for food, and a lot more competition for mates. But there are some advantages, such as increased protection from predators and cooperative food gathering. In order to balance the costs and benefits of group living, primates developed mechanisms to encourage bonding. In particular, grooming. There's nothing like picking fleas off your uncle to get rid of some group tension. However, at some point in our evolution, this became untenable because group size kept increasing. Once a group gets larger than, say, 20 individuals, there just isn't enough time in the day to groom everyone. You'd be doing it forever. So humans and our ancestors needed another mechanism to encourage bonding, hence the evolution of music. Rhythm, harmony, and predictability are hypothesized to be the driving force behind this. As we sing and play music in a group and successfully harmonize, this creates feelings of fulfilled expectations, successful predictions, and mutual accomplishment. These feelings are of course accompanied by a dopamine hit. Importantly, this dopamine hit lasts much longer than the performance of the music and fosters a sense of bonding between everyone who took part. And there is definitely evidence to support this idea.
If you just do experiments with people, you take strangers, and you have one group of strangers do some kind of arbitrary task, and you have a second group, you kind of randomize people into different groups, and one group does, I'm not quite sure, write some essay or does something, and the other group sings and dances together, and then you do some psychological measures of how close do you feel to these people. Indeed, the group in the singing group or the dancing group will kind of have higher ratings on feeling close or friendly or altruistic towards these strangers. So there is some evidence for the social bonding hypothesis.
If you look at this mural behind me, no doubt everyone on it felt close to their fellow musicians, felt close to their bandmates, loved performing together, really felt like it bonded them to their fellow musician. And I think we all feel that there's something to the social bonding hypothesis. Music bringing us together, it really is like a universal human experience. I think that's true. Critics of the hypothesis argue though, firstly, do we actually need to groom each other to be social? Maybe not being eaten by a lion is enough motivation to hang out with your friends. And secondly, just because music has this effect on us, is that necessarily the initial reason why it evolved? Or is that just a happy byproduct? Almost like the auditory cheesecake hypothesis again.
And that's exactly, so there are studies that show that petting animals reduces anxiety. That doesn't mean that petting animals evolved, that we evolved to pet animals to reduce our anxiety. So there's all of these, causality, there's all kinds of complex causal relations in the world, and almost none of them evolved to have that effect. So we all enjoy petting animals. It may reduce our anxiety, but that's a very bad explanation for why we like petting animals. Yeah. That we evolved to pet our dogs to reduce our own anxiety. So we probably did not evolve to sing and dance to feel close to people, even though it does have that effect. Exactly. Yeah.
It would be hard to name a musical performance more awe-inspiring, more spine-tingling than the Maori haka. Sometimes performed to intimidate enemies, other times to celebrate big occasions, honored guests, other times a celebration of life. There's no one reason to perform it. But whatever the occasion, one thing's for certain, it's a clear display of the prestige, power, and unity of the group performing it. Does the origin of human music, all human music, lay in a similar desire to display, to signal to those around you, whether friend or foe?
So if we look at other species, including songbirds and other species, whales that give off these complex vocalizations, almost all the theories that evolutionary biologists have proposed are what we call signaling theories. So there's some information about individual A or that individual A has that they benefit by communicating to the audience, might be one other individual or multiple individuals, and that the audience members also benefit by getting that information. So that's signaling. But the problem that comes up in any signaling system is the problem of lying or cheating. So males want to mate with females, so there'd be an incentive to give a false signal of genetic quality. Let's say a male with a lot of mutations was able to falsely kind of indicate that he was mutation-free. He would get mating benefits, but the females would not benefit because their offspring would have birth defects. So females would evolve to ignore the signal unless they can trust it. And that's what we mean by credible signaling. That's what evolutionary biologists mean by credible signals that you can't fake.
Auditory signals are almost inherently credible. You either make a noise, make the correct noise, or you don't. One of the most common things animals want to signal is territorial defense. I'm here. I'm willing to defend this spot of land. The chirps of this squirrel might not intimidate us, but they're letting everyone know, hey, stay off my fence. Another excellent example would be wolf howls. A pack of wolves howling is inherently a credible signal. It is impossible to fake. If the wolf literally isn't there, then no howl can be heard. If there's only one lone wolf, it can't pretend to be 5 or 6.
And there's actually good loudspeaker studies that show this in both lions and actually chimpanzees have these loud pant hoots that they do together as well that show that other potential intruders are listening and they can count. So if you play one individual or 2 individuals, they might still approach the speaker. But if you play 3, they won't do it. So our hypothesis is that human music may have evolved from something like wolf howls, because we were beginning to move from a more plant-based diet into a more meat-based diet. We were becoming predators ourselves. And so we may have evolved very much something like a wolf howl to advertise this is our hunting territory.
Although our music now may be extremely different to the signaling calls of wild animals, no one could deny that signaling, or to phrase it another way, performance, is an integral part of music. One implication of this idea is that the origins of human music are really, really old as Homo erectus, as old as the Australopithecines.
Is that how far you would project it back into time?
Easily, because we see that gibbons, who are also apes, and we are relatively close relatives of gibbons, give these very complex music-like vocalizations, and they do it in duets. So a highly coordinated note-like sequence of note-like vocalizations.
Yeah.
So if we're seeing it in gibbons, it could potentially even be in the last common ancestor of humans and chimps, or if not then, potentially sometime in the evolution of hominins in the Australopithecines or early Homo. Absolutely, absolutely. So a very deep time frame. Now, it may have initially been more like, the chimpanzee pant hoot, not such a complex vocalization.
Yeah. Maybe
more like wolf howling and coyote howling. So when it acquired this more complex structure, could have been early because we see it in gibbons, could have been a little later, we don't really know.
The credible signaling hypothesis also attempts to explain another very common form of music, parents singing to children. The idea is that singing a lullaby to a child is a credible signal because it's impossible to have a conversation really with someone else at the same time. So if a crying child hears their mother or father singing to them, they know they have their full attention, more or less. They might be watching TV, but they won't be chatting to someone else. Like sheep, really, like how sheep communicate to their children, like how many animals communicate to their children. What I really love about the credible signaling hypothesis is that it doesn't put human music on this pedestal above the vocalizations of all the other animals out there. It doesn't attempt to explain our behavior separately from theirs. And I always like that. I always love that approach. Not that we're not unique in many ways, but there's so much we can learn about our behavior and our history through studying our fellow Earthlings. So that approach, it just always resonates with me. Saying that, there are elements of truth in all 4 of these hypotheses. Music does tickle our senses. We do find it attractive. It certainly bonds us together, and we definitely use it to intimidate our enemies. So I can't really wrap this video up neatly for you, It's just something you're going to have to ponder as you singing in the shower. Incredibly signal to everyone in the shower about what you're doing. Supported by Curiosity Stream and Nebula. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I put a lot of work into it. Finding the footage of gibbons singing in Laos was not easy, but I'm happy to do it. I love to do it. This video actually came out earlier and ad-free over on Nebula, a streamy, award-nominated platform with over 14,000 titles made by some absolutely banging educational channels like Tierzoo and Cogito, two channels I love. I'm sure if you watch my stuff, you know who they are. Nebula is a platform where independent educational creators can sort of push the boundaries a little bit, get a bit more creative with shows that just might not be successful on YouTube, might not be as clickbaity or dramatic, you know. One series I genuinely love is Extremities by Wendover Productions, which takes a look at life in the most remote communities around the world. And it's fantastic. It's really thoughtfully made. There's interviews with locals, there's interviews with experts. You can watch all of that for free by signing up with CuriosityStream, another great service I watch, with over 1,000 documentaries. These are bigger budget, produced by actual production companies and things like that. One I've been watching is Secrets of the Universe, about the next frontier of space exploration. We're going to go back to the moon in my lifetime, and that's really exciting. I'm a bit of a nerd for that. Like, I really want us to go back to the moon. You can get all of this entertainment, Nebula and CuriosityStream, for just $14.79 for the entire year. $14.79 for a year. It's a bargain. It's a steal. I know because I got it myself last Christmas. Yes, guys. CuriosityStream, Nebula, on the TV, ready to go. $14.79 a year. I couldn't say no. It's a steal. It's a bargain. So head on over to curiositystream.com/Stefan Milo or click on the link in the description. Go check it out. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Hopefully I'll produce some banging exclusives myself in the near future. I certainly hope so. Huge thanks to Professor Ed Hagen for generously sharing his time and his expertise. And huge thanks, as always, to my Patreons for just keeping this whole show ticking along. See ya!